And I think I saw you just a second ago. So.
Cynthia, this is Gerald. Can you hear me?
Gotcha, Gerald. Thank you. Are you calling in?
I'm calling in.
Okay, great. And I think I saw Mayor Morgan on. Are you on, Mayor Morgan?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Saw Mayor Morgan's, Councilmember Flanagan, Matea, Terry Mitchell, Mark Jones, Commissioner Jones, Mayor Houston, Judge Bisco,
Terry Mitchell. Should have Oakley.
got Oakley. Yep. All right. And as soon as Councilmember Kitchen gets back on, it looks like we'll at least have a quorum to start.
Chair Long,
Chair Long, would you note me, Bridget Shea?
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Chair Long, this is Dan Kitchen.
Okay, great, thank you. There's Mayor Van Arsdale.
On Tucker Ferguson, I'm on.
Okay, thank you, Tucker. Got you.
Can you hear me okay, Commissioner Long? This is Ed.
Yes, got you. Thanks, Ed. And okay, so we have a quorum, and so let me just confirm. I'm calling the meeting to order at 2:03, and we are meeting via WebEx, and let me just go through the list of folks that I think we have, and if I miss somebody, let me know. Commissioner Long, Councilmember Kitchen, Commissioner Daugherty, Judge Bisco, Tucker Ferguson, Councilmember Flanagan, Mayor Houston, Commissioner Jones, Councilmember Matea, Terry Mitchell, Mayor Morgan, Judge Oakley, Commissioner Shea, Terrio, and Mayor Van Arsdale. Did I miss anybody?
Adler's here too.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. All right, so with that, we have a quorum, and let me go to the individuals who have signed up for public comment. We have two that have signed up for public comment, and we'll go to David King first.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Give me just 1 second so I can get my timer. You'll have 3 minutes, and let's see. And okay, go ahead and begin, Mr. King. Your time starts now.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, board members. I'm calling to please urge you not to change the Campo board meetings from noon to 2 p.m. This time change will disproportionately impact Black and Latino neighborhoods with inequitable and infrequent transit services compared to other neighborhoods in West and Central Austin. I'm also urging you to please ensure that Campo's transportation policies acknowledge that major transit investments and transit-oriented development facilitate involuntary displacement of low-income families, communities of color, and small community-based businesses located on or near transit corridors. Please ensure that Campo transportation policies prioritize robust and sustained displacement prevention funding for all major transit investments and transit-oriented development. Displacement prevention must be prioritized to help sustain thousands of low-income families, scores of small local businesses, and communities of color located on or adjacent to transit corridors in Austin. Please establish a Campo transportation policy that prohibits the use of anti-displacement funds for market rate mixed-use density bonus developments. Copious evidence here in Austin shows that these developments facilitate involuntary displacement of low-income families, communities of color, and small community-based businesses, while they produce very few housing units and virtually no businesses that are affordable to families earning at or below 60% median income. Please ensure that Campo policies acknowledge that transit programs based on area median income are inequitable to low-income families of color. The area median income for Black and Latino families in Austin is roughly $45,000, which is less than half of the area median income for Austin. Transit-related housing programs based on area median incomes at or above 60% do not serve or benefit most low-income Black and Latino families in Austin. This is a prime example of institutional racism and systemic inequities embedded in our transit-related housing programs that are ostensibly designed to equitably serve families of color. Please expand the Campo Transportation Policy Board to include 3 community-based residents from low-income communities, communities of color, and small local businesses in the Eastern Crescent. These community-based residents should have full voting rights and authority to oversee and facilitate equitable implementation of transportation policies and transit-related anti-displacement funding. Thank you for considering my comments and for your service.
Thank you, Mr. King. Just as a reminder, if you are not speaking, please mute your microphone. There's a lot of background noise. If you wouldn't mind, please muting your microphone. Ms. Alexander Kasparek.
Hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Go ahead and begin. Your time starts now.
Thank you, Campo Board, for hearing me each month as I request and receive time to comment publicly and on the record on behalf of my ancestors, my siblings, and countless descendants of Daniel and Emmeline Alexander. I've shared a bit of the history of the Alexander Farm at Polit Bob as the legacy acreage of 173 years of African-American family farming in Central Texas. I've noted that the Alexander family history has been on display in Texas since 1977, and that our family progenitor, Daniel Alexander, was already a seasoned and nationally known racehorse breeder and trainer when he was brought to McKinney Falls to build that founding Texans thoroughbred enterprise in the shadow of the state's 86-million-year-old subterranean volcano. As we, the Alexander family, have unearthed more of Daniel's story, we've discovered our great-great-great-grandmother, Cindy, whom Daniel was able to keep with him because of his national horse breeding acumen. The same talent and backbreaking work that made him a landowner before slaves were legally allowed personhood also allowed him to keep his familial ties that were often meaningless to even the most benign slaveholders. That same strength and perseverance has been shown by historians to undergird his relationship to the Alexanders of Virginia and Kentucky, who first brought thoroughbreds to this country in 1786 and are now recognized as the founding family of thoroughbred racehorse breeding in America. Our ancestors are buried in the Alexander Cemetery, next to and part of the Alexander Farm on US 183 at Cottonmouth Creek. If TxDOT Project CSJ 0152-01-086, the expansion of US 183 between State Highway 71 and State Highway 130 is allowed to encroach upon the Alexander Farm and Cemetery, their Black lives, that of my ancestors, will not only not matter in the eyes of Texas, but their bones, often placed in unmarked graves, may be unnecessarily disturbed, if not bulldozed as well. If city leadership dreams of addressing the systemic racism and inequity that have been baked into Austin and Travis County since their beginnings when Daniel arrived with the McKinneys, then Black farms must matter. Recent studies show that more than 95% of farmland once owned by Black families in the South have been lost or has been lost, swallowed up by corporate conglomerates, or out and out stolen through systemic racism. Since learning of the proposed US 183 expansion route, Alexander family representatives have requested in meetings and comments that alternative routes for the US 183 expansion be examined. We have suggested alternatives that include FM 973 via projects that are already on the active projects list within the Regional Transportation Plan for 2045. FM 973 is currently a largely undeveloped 2-lane roadway scheduled for a 4-lane upgrade that parallels US 183. Our primary hope and desire is that TxDOT will consider any alternative route that does not deprive Travis County, the state of Texas, and or the nation of its more inclusive historical touchstone in Central Texas, the Alexander Farm and Cemetery. Thank you for your attention and your consideration.
Madam Chair.
Hello? Anybody there? Hello?
Are you there?
Yes. Did you hear my comments?
No, Ms. Joseph, I believe we have you also on public comment. Are you ready to start?
Madam Chair, if we have questions, this is the third time Mrs. Alexander has spoken to us and asked us to intervene to prevent the loss of her family cemetery. At what point is it appropriate for us to ask TxDOT for information about this?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I was just gonna, and my apologies for interrupting the public comments. I just noticed that it was the third time, and I was just seeing if for either for a future meeting or something like that, we can get that on the calendar to talk about that.
What I will do, since it's not posted on the agenda, we can't discuss that today, but I would, since it's a TxDOT related project, I would ask our TxDOT district engineer to provide an update with regard to that project to the policy board.
Thank you, ma'am. I didn't mean to
Madam
interrupt.
Chair, Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Shea. Just for clarification, when someone raises an issue like this in public comment, are we unable under the rules to get any point of information clarification on it? Are we required to wait until the next meeting to even get any information?
I believe that under the Open Meetings Act, if it's not specifically posted as an agenda item, we cannot discuss it. And I'm going to let Tim, our attorney, is on the line to weigh in on that. But at this point, and certainly any member of the public can feel free to contact any member of the policy board or vice versa if they have questions in between meetings. But I've asked, and Tucker, I think you're on the call, and heard that request. So.
I am Chair Long, and we would be happy to come to the next meeting with a project update of where we are and the work we've done to this point through the environmental process.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Tucker. And it sounds like to me, Madam Chair, well, Ashby's aware of it too, and Ashby would like to be a part of it. He'd like to hear more about that too as well. So thank you, Tucker.
Of course.
And Tucker,
right,
in addition, Madam Chair, Tucker, in addition to a project update, could you please address the issue of the disturbance of the family cemetery that Mrs. Alexander has addressed us about now for 3 different meetings?
Absolutely. We've met with
Tucker, if you could hang on, it's not posted on the agenda. So if you would hold off and give us an update at our next meeting. I just don't want us running afoul of the Open Meetings Act by getting into a discussion at this point.
And Madam Chair, can we just get a ruling from the attorney? At Commissioner's Court, we are able to get points of information about items that the public raise. It's not a discussion, but it's factual points of information. So if we could get information from our attorney about whether or not that's allowed in these meetings, that would be helpful.
We will do that for a future meeting. Ms. Joseph, are you on the call?
I believe
Okay,
she's still trying to log in.
Okay, I think we have her actually on, I'm sorry, for agenda item number 6. So with that, we will move on. I have no announcements at this point. We'll move on to, and by the way, I think Mayor Hill has joined us as well as Council Member Alter. So the only ones I have missing today are Commissioner Beckett and Mayor Ross and Commissioner Trevelyan. So do we have a report from the TAC?
Chair Long, this is Chad McCowan, Campo staff, to report on this item.
Okay, go ahead, Chad.
Okay, thank you. The TAC did not meet in July. However, in place of the TAC meeting on July 20th, Campo facilitated a workshop by WebEx for TxDOT and Federal Highways to present modifications to the NHS, the National Highway System, which were presented by TxDOT and their consultants at Jacobs. The workshop was open to all TAC members to participate, but this format was chosen in place of a formal TAC meeting as only a very small number of agencies had requested any NHS changes.
Okay, does anybody have any questions of Chad from the TAC update? Okay, hearing none, we have no need for item number 5. We'll move on to item number 6. And I have one individual that has signed up for item number 6. Ms. Alexander Kasparic, I believe you're signed up for item number 6.
Yes, I am, Madam Chair. The Alexander family asked that the Campo Board amend the written minutes of June 8th, 2020's meeting to include the Campo Board member's statement of non-support for encroaching upon or bulldozing land at the Alexander Farm and Cemetery as a result of TxDOT's US 183 expansion. Specifically, her question, an exchange with TxDOT's engineer, and her statement may be heard at approximately 7 minutes and 50 seconds into the meeting recording. Specifically, the quote is, "For the record, if the plan ultimately goes through this farm and destroys some of it, I will not be supporting that." We're asking that that be placed in the written minutes if at all possible.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of
I'm sorry.
You said that.
Yeah, we just, the Alexander family is asking that the board amend the written minutes of the June 8th meeting to include that statement from the board member who said, "For the record, if the plan ultimately goes."
So I'm sorry, my question is which board member? Because we can't attribute it to somebody that, unless we know who it is.
That's kind of my problem. I know this is going to sound extremely naive. I don't know the voices of all the board members, and I don't know all their names. So unfortunately, in the audio recording, there is no name identification for the person who makes that statement, but it's definitely in the recording. Sorry?
This is Commissioner Shea. I believe I made that statement.
Oh, great. Hi. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your support.
Commissioner Shea, are you amenable to including that statement in the minutes?
Yes, I am. I would like the minutes to reflect more detail of general events and specifically that statement.
Okay, so is there a motion to, I'm sorry, Ms. Alexander, do you have any other comments on that item?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay.
It was simply that we, would like that in the written minutes. It's already in the audiovisual version, but we'd like it in the written minutes if at all possible.
All right, thank you. So is there a motion to adopt the minutes with that amendment?
I move to approve.
Okay, so Judge Lee, motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
I got Mayor Morgan on a second. All right, so we will, and just as a reminder, if everybody could please mute your speaker if you're not speaking. All right, so we have a motion and a second to adopt the meetings from the previous meeting. Let me just do this in reverse. Is there anybody against the motion? Okay, so we will and assume that all are in favor. So the motion to adopt the meetings from the June 8th meeting passes unanimously. Okay, now we are moving on to item number 7, discuss and take appropriate action on the MOU between Campo, the City of Round Rock, and TxDOT. And I believe Mr. Collins has this one.
Thank you. Yes. So item 7, I know it was under the consent agenda, but so this is basically an MOU. So any transit provider that directly receives 5307 funding is required to adopt a memorandum of understanding in regards to the metropolitan planning and programming process. This is something we have with Capital Metro, and now that Round Rock has taken over transit operations and become a direct recipient of 5307 funding. We have this standard MOU. It's basically just a collaboration agreement that we will collaborate on the planning and programming process, especially in regards to performance measures. If you recall, we have transit asset management performance measures that we adopt on an annual basis, and that is something that we will collaborate with Round Rock. And so this MOU, it's a joint MOU between the Campo Policy Board, the transit provider, the city of Round Rock in this case, and then as well as TxDOT. That's just a high-level summary. It's just basically a collaborative agreement to ensure that we work together, and it also ensures that they have a place. State of Round Rock already has representation both on the TAC and the policy board. If that was not the case prior to that, this MOU would spell that out, but that's already been addressed. But I'll take any questions and request approval of the MOU. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Collins? Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
All right, Mayor Morgan, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Who was the second, please?
Disco came first.
All right, thank you, Judge. All right, we'll do this the same way. Is there anybody against this motion? All right, hearing none, motion passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on to item number 8. There is one individual who is signed up to speak on this item. Ms. Joseph, are you on the call yet?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I'm Zenobia Joseph. I'm referring to the language that specifies permanently changing the Transportation Policy Board meeting start time to 2:00 p.m. You've relied on transit as it relates to that justification. I do appreciate that you acknowledge that the buses do run at 6 o'clock. You have 6:00 p.m. and they only run once an hour between 6 and 10 p.m. That information only applies to the black routes. And so I do find it disturbing that that would be the justification. I am an individual who attends the meetings, and I've not had a problem attending the meetings in the evenings on the bus. And I don't usually have a problem getting home either. Commissioner Shea brought me home once. It was a bad weather day. But aside from that, I usually just catch the bus. I do want to call your attention to the item that did pass, and I think it's germane. I didn't speak during public comments, but the City of Austin and Capital Metro, as they passed their resolution for Project Connect, it also specified leaving the existing local and regional bus network as it is, that it should be maintained. And so I do find that disturbing as well. I'm not really sure what else to say to you other than to say that I provided my information to the Federal Highway Administration and also to the U.S. Department of Treasury. I didn't go into details about the Treasury. That's CARES Act funding related to the City of Austin. But I want you to understand that it is deeply disturbing. The mayor, in his address on Wednesday, basically said that Project Connect, once fully built, will bring more frequent and rapid transportation to jobs, education, and health care for tens of thousands of Black and brown households, and that is just misleading. I want you to understand that specifically there's a difference between ridership and coverage. And ridership is when you think like a business and you choose the target audience, which would be the white millennials that took the surveys for Capital Metro. And the coverage is where you're talking about getting the meetings or getting to school and work in the grocery stores. And so those are my comments. I just would say in closing that the only way that I see fixing this problem so that you don't hear from me ad nauseum since the Capital Metro refuses to change the system is to remove Councilmember Kitchen from the board and Wade Cooper, the chair, since you appointed both of these individuals. And they've done nothing more than resolutions, but they've not been willing to follow the Federal Transit Administration Circular 4702.1B, which is the Title VI guidelines that require them to reanalyze these routes and implement the least discriminatory alternative. And if you have any questions, I'll gladly answer them at this time. And that reference that I mentioned is October 1st, 2012. And thank you so much for allowing me to make my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph.
You're welcome.
I don't believe we had anyone else sign up for that particular agenda item. And again, as a reminder, we're on agenda item number 8. This relates to, as you know, obviously we have been meeting at 2 o'clock since we went virtual. And there was actually discussion before COVID-19 about moving the meeting to 2 o'clock. We've discovered that it works out well for a lot of people's and staff, as well as particularly right now making having the technical staff available to support the meeting. But I wanted to hear any comments that others might have about the meeting time, and then we'll entertain a motion on this item.
Well, I, for one, this is Oakley. I for one, like to move to 2 o'clock and would want to support that.
In the background material, there was a survey that was done on the different MPOs and the various times that they meet across the state. Councilmember Kitchen, you had a question.
If you could just speak to the location, if there's been any, into the extent to which, so everyone can hear the extent to which there's any need for change in the location because of the 2 o'clock.
Yeah, the current location can accommodate us at 2 o'clock. Obviously we would have to work with the university on when they might reopen for that. But we are, should they not be able to accommodate us in a manner that we deem as safe, we are also, going to have to look at other alternatives. But for now, and probably for the next meeting, at least, we'll be doing it via WebEx.
Thank you.
Chairman Long, this is Commissioner Shea.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner.
I don't know if Mayor Van Arsdal is still on, but he had raised a concern in a previous meeting that 2 o'clock was difficult for people who had full-time jobs outside of their political offices. And I thought there was a suggestion for possibly moving it to 4 p.m. Has there been any discussion of that option? Because that would allow people to still meet during the workday, but it wouldn't break up the workday as much as a 2 p.m. meeting does.
Is there anything, Mayor Van Arsdal? I do recall you made that comment.
Yeah, I'm on the call. Thank you, Bridget. As long as we're in Zoom, I don't know that the 2 or 4 is a big difference. I think when we go back to in person, it is harder on those of us that are in unpaid elected offices and we have other jobs to just be taking time off of our job in the middle of the day. I don't know if that's something, I think during COVID and Zoom, it's a little different. I don't know that it makes a difference whether it's 2 or 4. I do think when it goes back to in-person meetings that maybe some of those officials that's kind of what their job is. It is a little different for those of us to have another job.
This is Commissioner Shea. I've got a follow-up question. Would we be able to participate by Zoom in the future once it's safe to go back to large in-person meetings? I think that might help with some of the commuting and congestion issues that some folks may have, and it's certainly more convenient. So would our future meeting plans allow for participation via WebEx or whatever virtual methods are available?
I think we'd have to look at, number one, I think the statute allows it as long as there is a quorum present in person. Tim, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think actually the Travis County attorney ruled on that a while back, and then there was some legislation to that effect. But I think the challenge would be that we'd have to look at just from a technology perspective, since we're not in a location and we set up and tear down, we would just have to look into the capabilities of being able to do that with, if multiple people were interested. But we could, certainly put that on the checklist to look at. So
Chair Long?
Yes.
I'd like Mr. Tuggy to answer. My understanding from the county commissioners meetings is that we can participate both in person and virtually, and it doesn't require a quorum to be physically present.
Under the current governor's directive, under the pandemic disaster declaration, you're absolutely right, Commissioner. I was referring to prior to that, the legislation that allows that to occur. I believe in a non-pandemic mode, I think it requires a majority to be present. I had our county general counsel look at this about a month ago. But Tim, if you
please weigh in.
If you are up to speed on that, feel free to weigh in. Are you still there, Tim?
Yes, I'm here. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we do now.
Okay. I think you're correct. Under the governor's current declarations, we're obviously permitted to do what we're doing and have been doing. Under the prior law, I do not believe we could. It would require some changes in the law in order to have a mixed meeting or continue a full Zoom meeting after the governor's, assuming the governor's declarations expire at some point.
Tim,
I suspect, having said that, that one of the first items that's going to get continued for quite a long time is the governor's authorization of Zoom meetings and mixed meetings for quite some time. And I suspect also it will be taken up firsthand in the session in January of 2021.
And Tim, this is Commissioner Shea. Our county attorney, I believe, had, can y'all hear me okay?
I can hear you. Go ahead. It's garbled up.
I believe our county attorney had advised us that we could legally have members of the Commissioners Court participate virtually long before the governor issued the emergency order. So is the law different for Campo?
I will check with the county attorney and get a readout on that position. That's not my interpretation of the law prior to the governor's declaration. Well, maybe I certainly will take up your.
Yeah, maybe Gerald can weigh in because Gerald Doherty has been participating virtually in the county commissioners meetings for a number of years.
So Commissioner, and Tim, you may not be up to speed on this. I did have our attorney look at it. The statute says that if a majority, prior to COVID, if majority of the body is physically present, then other members may join via some kind of video conferencing means.
Correct.
Is the way the statute is my understanding. And that was our legal counsel looked into that about a month ago. So with all that said,
that's a simple majority, correct, Commissioner Long? Is that a simple majority?
Yes.
Okay.
So for quorum purposes, not a simple majority, but it has to be a quorum of the organizations.
That's correct. And that's the baseline that I'm speaking to. You have to have, if the declaration were not in place, you have to have a quorum in person. You can have others join in, but for purposes of compliance with the Open Meetings Act, you'd have to have everyone, a quorum, physically there.
So, Tim, I think that's what Bridget, my apologies, I think that's what Bridget was trying to convey is whether or not if we had enough people in person and therefore we can actually, in fact, start to utilize Zoom meetings moving forward.
Thank you.
I think you're right from a legislative standpoint.
That's my question, Rudy.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense for the ledge. I think the ledge will be taking that moving forward. So I think that does help bridge the gap between the two. And I kind of like the 4 o'clock idea personally. And I do like the idea that Mayor Morgan brought up a fact about having people who want to call and give public comment the ability to participate, via Zoom or call in and whatever during the day, help facilitate and help lessen the burden. Some of our public are trying to attend and listen to stuff from there as well.
So is the proposal right now is 2 o'clock. And just once again, a reminder, please mute your microphones. I'm hearing a bunch of paper shuffling in the background. Thank you. And for the purposes of especially our WebEx support, we are utilizing IT support that is available during the day. And so my concern in the near term is to make sure that that continues to be available. So as long as we're using this platform for the near term, we really do need to meet earlier in the event that we run after 5 o'clock, which I'm hoping we're not doing again anytime soon, but that has been the case for a few times. So what my proposal, let's look at it this way, is that while we still have the ability to meet virtually or partially virtually, that we keep it at 2 o'clock, and then differently if we, at the point in time that we resume full-time in-person meetings. And I'll make that in form of a motion.
Commissioner Long, I agree. This is Oakley, and I'll second the motion.
Okay, so the motion is that we continue to meet at 2 o'clock and then at the point in time in the future when we move back to in-person or to partial, that we look perhaps at a 4 o'clock, but keep it at 2 o'clock for now.
Yeah, we can always readdress it.
Yeah.
Chair Long, can we be assured that this is going to be on the on a future agenda to discuss it when it comes back?
We can make sure that we put it back on the agenda once we things are going to change for the meeting.
Yeah, because I can tell you I can do the 2, but only because I'm retired. This means if we do this in person, I've got to leave San Marcos at noon. And I know that this would have been a problem for my predecessor to have to take off a half day in order to make a meeting. So just wanted to get that in there. Thank you.
All right. Is there any other discussion? Okay, we'll do this in reverse. Anybody? Oh, wait a minute. No, we've already heard from her. All right. Anybody against the motion? Okay, then we will assume all those items or that passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on to item number 9. Discuss and take appropriate action on amendments to the Campo National Highway System Network.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. This is Akila from TechStart. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to make this presentation. This item is essentially a follow-up to item number 4 that was discussed earlier by Mr. Chad. TechStart has completed a statewide evaluation of the National Highway System. We are looking at facilities throughout the state to see if any modifications are needed for the National Highway System designation. If you could go to the next slide, please. This slide provides an overall timeline for this study. We started the study back in winter of 2018. We first met with Campo on January 18, 2019, and then we had subsequent meetings with the staff. And the TAC review was also completed in summer of 2019. Based on the recommendations we got from Campo, we had supplemental evaluations and also conducted a review with FHWA. And then the revised modifications were discussed in detail again with the TAC, Technical Advisory Committee, on July 20th, 2020. That was what was mentioned in item number 4 earlier. So we are here today to get the policy board's approval on the same recommendations that were discussed in detail with the TAC on July 20th. We just have a brief presentation here to provide some additional details. I'll pass it on to Curtis Jones to discuss those details. Next slide, please. Curtis, you might be on mute.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry about that break in action there. As Akila said, I'm Curtis Jones. I'm the project manager for this particular project, and I'm going to take the presentation on from here. So basically, with the NHS evaluation process, what we took some major considerations in for the NHS include. We wanted it to serve major activity centers or intermodal facilities, serve long-distance travel needs, and connect large regions, mobility across a region, especially between the outlying areas and the urban core. We wanted to avoid residential areas and provide limited access to surrounding land uses and direct interstate highways and freeways and expressways. The recommendations supported by roadway performance data and review of the regional system connectivity. Okay, so what we did is we looked at the system and we wanted to add 3 corridors and remove 22 corridors. As far as the intermodal facilities, we want to remove 2 intermodal facilities on the system that no longer serve traffic, and that's Park and Ride in the Robert Mueller Airport. So where we are in the process, the MPO's staff, the MPO staff led the reviews of the NHS modifications and provided recommendations to the study team. TxDOT and FHWA final review and concurrence. We coordinated a review of recommendations based on the federal guidelines. And at this point, where we are now is where you come in, the policy board support and MPO concurrence statements. The MPO will provide official concurrence statements in the form of an MPO letter of resolution supporting the modifications. And if anyone has any comments, after the meeting, here's my information. You can contact me via email or cell phone. I won't, because I'm not in the office now, but you can contact me on my mobile phone. That concludes the presentation. Are there any questions or that anyone has or the board has?
Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Jones on the item? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion on this item?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, Councilmember Matea, is there a second? I'll second that motion. Is there anyone against the motion? All right, then we will assume that passes unanimously. Item number 9. Okay, moving on. Let's see, let me get back. Item number 10, discuss and take appropriate action on amendments to the 2019 TIP and the Long Range Transportation Plan.
Yeah, thank you. This is Ryan Collins with Campo staff. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So this is a out-of-cycle amendment request that I'm bringing to the policy board. So we have received 3 requests for out-of-cycle amendments, and we're looking to process those through the quick action option, which is outlined in the public participation plan. And just to reiterate, we do have, we regularly amend both the TIP and the long range plan. Most of y'all are familiar with this. We do it in the spring and also in the fall. That's usually an extensive process where we take applications and then take the amendments out for public involvement. And then it goes through a couple of rounds to the policy board and also to the TAC. But we also have the quick action option. Occasionally, we will receive amendment requests that are urgent in nature. Typically, it has to do with some federal or state requirement or deadline that needs to be that requires the amendment. And that's the case here with these three amendments. We have one that was submitted from the city of San Marcos. They are looking to transfer some FTA 5339 funds. These funds were originally allocated to CARTS back in 2016. But as some of y'all know, San Marcos has actually taken over transit operations in their city. And so they're looking to utilize these funds to purchase a paratransit bus. The kicker with this one is that those funds actually lapse at the end of this federal fiscal year, which is September 30th. And so we are looking to amend that those funds into the current Transportation Improvement Program, which is currently that is the 2019-2022 TIP that is active up until the new TIP is approved at the federal level. That is the new TIP is the one that was approved back on June 8th. That's the 21-2024 TIP. But so we're still currently operating under the 1922. So we're looking to amend this project into that. And just to let y'all know that it has had previous public outreach. This funding was originally listed under CARTS back in the 2017-2020 TIP. We also received a request from the city of Leander and TxDOT. This is a Safe Routes to School project that is scheduled to let in the next couple of months. And so we're looking to roll this project over from the current TIP into the new TIP to ensure that the listing, it is listed in the current TIP at the time of the construction letting. That's one of the important functions of the TIP is that it, in order to be certified for construction letting, the project has to be listed in whichever one the current TIP is. And because this one is, this project is currently scheduled to let in that transition area between the 2019-22 TIP and potentially the 21-2024 TIP. That is currently awaiting federal approval. We don't know when that will be, so we want to go ahead and proactively roll this over into the new TIP just to ensure that that project is listed when it goes to construction. This project, just a reminder, was selected through the 2019-2022 project call and TIP development process back in 2018. So it did go through extensive public involvement back in the spring of 2018. And then finally, we also have an amendment from TxDOT in Hays County. This is for the FM 2001 corridor. This project is, they're requesting it be added to the long-range 2045 long-range transportation plan to the roadway listings. This project has been previously listed in the 2035 long-range plan as well as the 2040. And right now it's undergoing basically finalizing the NEPA process. They've done an environmental assessment on it and are completing the findings of no significant impact, or the FONSI. And in order for the environmental process to be complete, it does have to be listed in the current plan. So we are looking to add this project to the 2045 long-range plan. One thing I do want to point out about all of these projects is that none of them impact fiscal constraints. And none of them allocate funding. These are all funds that were previously selected and allocated either by this policy board. And as far as that, and the long-range plan listing, that project is partially funded but not completely funded currently. And all of these amendments do fulfill some regulatory requirements. So again, they don't involve actually allocating any funding. So that concludes my presentation on these three items. If you have any questions, and again, I do want to mention that we will be having the regular fall amendment cycle. We will be opening that up later this month. But all of these have imminent. These three projects have imminent issues that need to be addressed through an out-of-cycle amendment. So that concludes my presentation. If you'll go to the next slide. We are requesting approval of these amendments and Resolution 2020-810. Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is
Mr. Collins. I messed up on the previous one. Go ahead and get a motion in a second, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Move approval. It's Oakley.
Okay, Oakley moves approval. Who was the second?
Jones.
Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead, Commissioner Shea.
Does this have any impact on the deferred and maintained lists that we had such extensive discussions over? It's a $48 million plus project, the I-35 to, I can't see the screen again, but the changing it to a 4-lane, $48 million project. How does this not have any fiscal impact? I'm not clear on this.
This project is not currently funded right now. It's just going through the planning process, which is why it's required to be in the long-range transportation plan.
We're amending the TIP to add it to the TIP, correct? And isn't the TIP fiscally constrained? Don't you have to have the money identified?
Yes, for the TIP, if you'll go back to the previous slide, the FM 2001 project is exclusively being added to the 2045 RTP. It is not currently listed in the current TIP, and we're not adding it to the TIP because it is not funded at this point. It is only going through the environmental.
I thought this item was TIP amendments.
It's TIP and plan.
Oh, okay.
So this particular item, the first two that he listed are the TIP amendments. And the third one, which you just asked about, Commissioner Shea, is the plan update.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone against item number 10? Okay, item number 10 passes unanimously. We'll move on to item number 11, presentation on potential open roads policy for the Campo region.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Tom Fowler. I'm with Kinley Horn and Associates. Kinley Horn is working with Campo and the Texas Department of Transportation to implement some of the recommendations that came out of the 2018 Regional Incident Management Strategic Plan. That Regional Incident Management Strategic Plan looked at a number of recommendations. Many of those were specific to cities, counties, and TxDOT, but there were 6 overall recommendations that we wanted to move forward with as a region. These were focused on some of the areas that we felt like had the greatest potential for benefits, including things like how we deal with hazardous material and non-hazmat spills in the area, how we deal with large vehicle crashes and moving those off the roadway. But one of the ones that we wanted to focus on in the beginning was developing an open roads policy. The idea of an open roads policy is it affirms the commitment of the region to having quick, safe clearance of roads. And we think that's vitally important because the sooner we can move incidents off the roadway, the sooner we can incidents off of the roadway, the sooner, the more safe those incidents become. We're able to get first responders out of the roadway. We're able to get people involved in the incident off the road, and anyone that's coming up on that incident. And then we've all been there where we've suddenly found ourselves stopping on a road unexpectedly, hoping the person behind us doesn't run into us. The sooner we can reduce those cues like that, the safer we can make those incidents. Next slide, please. We can go to the next slide, please. To give a quick overview of the draft policy, generally it's pretty straightforward. We modeled it on what many other states have done around the country where we felt like their open roads policies were effective. Essentially, it says that whenever a road or a lane is blocked, that responders shall reopen the roadway as soon as possible in an urgent manner. Safety of the public and incident responders remains the highest priority and must be preserved. And we think the two of those go hand in hand very well. Opening roads quicker also means safer for the public and for responders. Next slide, please. The policy sets targets. The overall target is to clear all incidents from the roadway within 90 minutes. And that's consistent with the what's called the National Unified Goal, a nationally recognized goal of first responders to try to clear incidents, including fatal incidents, within 90 minutes. We wanted to set some more specific goals for freeways with a goal to respond to incidents within 30 minutes. And that means being on scene and providing traffic control, and then clearing roadways, clearing freeways within 60 minutes. we don't have great data right now to say how realistic is that. So as we move forward with this policy and with some other programs we're looking at to try to improve that data collection, we'll have a better sense of if that 60 and 30-minute is realistic. And the hope is over time we can bring that down. But we feel like this is a good place to start based on the data we do have and based on what we've seen elsewhere in the nation. It does include an expectation that agencies regularly track and assess their traffic incident management performance. And we think that that's very important to know if the strategies, the programs, the training that are implemented in the region are being effective. Next slide, please. The plan also details some specific roles and responsibilities for agencies in the Campo region, including law enforcement, fire and medical and emergency medical services, road maintaining agencies, which would include TxDOT, CTRMA, counties and cities, and the regional TIM group, which is called AIM High. So we do identify some specific roles, but generally the key thing is that we're asking agencies to work together and set a priority towards quick, safe clearance. Next slide, please. The need for an open roads policy, we feel a sense of urgency. We all know that the region is growing, and the expectation of the growth over the next 30 years is going to make keeping capacity of roadways open even more critical. And that's important whether you're in a vehicle, whether you're on a bus, even in some cases commuter rail that could be blocked by incidents that happen at tracks. So clearing incidents is a key thing for mobility in the region. We know in the Campo region, the green line at the bottom, the crash rate per 100 million vehicle miles traveled has been increasing, trending upward over the years. Obviously, a key part of that is how can we reduce the crashes in the first place? And there's a lot of effort towards that. Funding like the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which helps cities and states identify and implement projects to make the roads safer. Efforts like TxDOT's Road to Zero, which is aimed at reducing and eliminating fatalities on all Texas roadways by the year 2050. However, for the foreseeable future, we know there's going to be people are going to make mistakes, vehicles are going to become disabled, people will be distracted, debris will fall on the roadway. All of those things we count as incidents because they block the roadway. So unfortunately, we know we have to deal with this for the foreseeable future, and we'll continue to focus on ways to improve and open the roads quicker. Next slide, please. We got traffic incidents in urban areas account for about 25% of congestion. That goes up to about 50% in more rural areas. So a key way to address congestion is to try to reduce the impact of these incidents. And most importantly, we know in this region with the reconstruction of 35 in the coming years, we're going to see limited capacity. During construction, where there's going to be times when roads are not available or very limited. We'll see times when there's not shoulders available, and we'll see times when freeways are closed down and people are detouring. Anytime we lose a lane in those situations, it becomes that much more important to respond quickly and safely in order to try to keep some sense of mobility in the region. So we want to look at programs, training, procedures that we can do soon in order to better prepare for the construction of I-35. We think the start to this is the open roads policy, setting a regional priority to keep roads open. Next slide, please. A key thing about the open roads policy, it does support existing and planned programs. Things like the HERO, the Highway Emergency Response Operations, the HERO trucks that are out there right now that Campo currently funds. We're trying to encourage and continue the use of that. Things like CTEC, the Combined Transportation Emergency Communication Center, where TxDOT, City of Austin Fire and Police, Travis County Sheriff work together to respond to incidents quickly. We want to continue to support these programs because we think they're very effective, but also focus on some of the additional goals that were set in the Regional Incident Management Strategic Plan to further improve our ability to handle incidents. Next slide, please. Outcomes that we're hoping, one, by starting with the policy and then continuing to focus on the recommendations in the Regional Incident Management Strategic Plan, we'll be able to improve safety at traffic incident scenes, reduce secondary crashes, reduce congestion due to traffic incidents, and be better prepared to deal with some of the challenges that we're going to see with construction coming up. And we want to have clear and reasonable expectations for how responding agencies deal with incidents, how we measure our ability to clear those incidents, and look towards improving that ability and speeding up clearance during incidents. And next slide. And finally, just wanted to mention a little bit about how this open roads policy fits in with other laws and other efforts. From the Texas law side of things, laws like the authority removal law, which allow authorities to remove debris from roadways without having a liability to basically push things off to the side and quickly open roads, the driver removal law, the move over and slow down law. We think the open roads policy works very well with these. It follows precedents we've seen in other states. We've seen states from Washington to Nevada to Tennessee to Georgia to Florida that have open roads policy. Texas is currently developing their own statewide open roads policy. We've been working very closely with the TxDOT statewide incident management coordinator in developing the open roads policy for Campo. There's not a time frame yet for when that open roads policy will be set. It will probably involve DPS and TxDOT. And we felt it was important to move forward with a policy for this region, particularly in light of the construction and level of congestion we expect to see. So we think Campo can lead the way. As far as we've seen, we have not seen another MPO or region that developed a plan. The other open roads policies we've seen have all been wide. We do see things like in Georgia, the Atlanta Regional Commission did pass a resolution to support Georgia's statewide law, and we've seen that many other places. But we feel like right now, given the level of congestion we expect to see, the upcoming construction, we'd like to move forward with having this as a priority for the region and look to have an open roads policy set. And then that should work hand in hand with wide policy if that's implemented sometime in the future. Next slide. And I think that wrapped it up. And
Tom, thank you for that update. I appreciate it. And I want to turn it over to Ashby in just a second, but I want to just make a comment. On my way to the meeting today, I got to see this in action. As I was coming south on 183, there was a police officer on a motorcycle, it had gotten in front of the traffic and was zigzagging back and forth to clearly slow the traffic down. And my first thought is there's a wreck ahead or something like that, and was doing it very effectively. Had slowed it, speed limit 65, had gotten us down to about 40, doing it in a very safe manner. And then we came up on another motorcycle police officer. This was around Duval at this point, who was clearing debris out of the roadway. And it was just the whole thing probably took less than 2 minutes. But one of them was this big strap and then, a couple of 2x4s that would have easily been a wreck. And so it's timely discussion because I experienced it on my way here. So shout out to the two motorcycle police officers from the APD that took care of that this afternoon. So it was good timing. Ashby, do you have any comments on this that you want to make, or do you want to just open it up for questions from the board?
I would just say at this point, can y'all hear me? I would just say at this point, we're not asking for approval today. This is an information item. We're going to take this to TAC at the next meeting and discuss this with TAC. Again, we brought it up before with TAC. But as Tom said, we're looking to try to have something in place before we really get started on the I-35 Central Expressway reconstruction work. We know that we're going to need to have every resource available to us to get through that project. Unlike a lot of other regions, we don't have multiple interstates running through the region. We don't have a beltway running through the region where we can reroute. So we have to use what we have available to us. So that's one of the reasons we're bringing this item forward.
So thank you, Ashby. While we still have Tom available, are there any questions that you might have of him?
Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Shea. I've got two questions.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I'm certainly supportive of this, but and I don't need a long explanation, but I kind of thought this was already the law, that you had to try and quickly remove accidents or vehicles or whatever. And it does seem to indicate under the supports existing Texas law that these are already in place. How is this different?
Tom, you want to try to answer that?
Thank you, Commissioner Shea. Yes, the driver removal law essentially requires that drivers, if you're in a crash and you can safely remove your vehicle, that you move it out of the travel way. And if it's on a freeway, you move it to off the freeway. So that's a very specific law. What we're looking for with the policy is essentially a commitment from transportation agencies, from first responders, to identify any way to improve incident response. So that's getting to the incident scene quicker, doing the investigations as fast and as efficiently as possible. Working with things like tow operators to put in places like the heavy tow policy or program that we're looking at to try to get heavy tow vehicles that are qualified into a scene as fast as possible. So I think what we're looking at is sort of a broader overall program to try to remove incidents as quick as possible, whereas the driver removal law puts the burden on drivers to get their vehicles out of the roadway if they are able to safely do so, but doesn't address all the response from first responders, from transportation agencies, et cetera, that are needed to more severe crashes or as the chair, and when we have debris in the roadway, trying to do things to be able to quickly identify that and move that off the road so we prevent other crashes.
My second question, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Shea, this is Ashby. I wanted to add on to that.
Oh, sure.
So one of the other reasons we were looking at this policy is I'm using a spill at this point, not hazmat, but let's say there's a truck that's carrying fruit and it overturns. What we're seeing is there's no consistent policy about how to clean that spill up and get the road open again. So not everybody knows that you can't sell that fruit again after it's turned over. And we have had instances where people have tried to go out. The carrier has brought in people and had, the traffic stopped on the roadway for hours trying to bring somebody in to scoop that fruit up and get it back in the truck in hopes that they can take it somewhere and sell it again. And you can't do that. So we're trying to just set uniform guidelines so folks have a sense of what you can and can't do, and we can hopefully speed, opening the roadways up again and also do so in a safe manner.
I got it. The other question I had related to the accident at 620, which was very unfortunate. 620 in Comanche Trail, when the ESD 6 fire truck driver had a medical incident, passed out, and the fire truck crossed over into oncoming traffic, smashed into several cars, then rolled over and knocked out the traffic light, and I think brought down some of the power lines at the same time. I think it took over 8 hours to clear that accident, and that was the only way for many people to get to and from home along 620. So I still don't know that I have a clear answer for exactly why that took so long, except it was a very complex and a dangerous accident. But would this help clear up something like that more quickly? That just sounded like it was terribly complicated because the traffic light had fallen across the lanes of traffic. I'd heard there was a live electrical wire across lanes of traffic as well. So how might this new policy help with something like that horrible 620 configuration accident?
I think through a policy like this, we're trying to support a number of different strategies. So even though I don't believe that particular crash resulted in a fatality, anytime there's a major crash like that that involves serious injury, a lot of time is spent on investigation. So we're looking at things like using drones, or some agencies in the region, not all, will come back and do an investigation later, in the evening or on the weekend when traffic is lighter. Certainly making sure that we have commitment of resources. So whether that's if we need a heavy wrecker to get out there to get the fire truck uprighted and off the road. Again, I don't know the specifics of that particular incident, if that was a delay in trying to get the right equipment out there to move the fire truck. As you mentioned, I remember hearing about the traffic signals that were out. So in that case, I believe those were TxDOT and not City of Austin signals that went out. So, there's a need to try to get the maintenance crews out there with the right equipment quickly. And again, we're trying to get that overall commitment from a high level to say, we understand that needs to be one of the highest priorities is to open that road, because as you said, leaving that road closed for hours created an incredible amount of congestion, but also just creates a safety issue for every driver out there. So I can't say specifically that we can make that happen faster, particularly with things like the electrical lines, but trying to improve policies and communications so we can get all the responders out there quickly. Sometimes this happens in a very linear fashion. An investigation is done, then a tow truck comes out and moves the vehicle, then the repairs are done to the roadway. A lot of times we feel like that could be done in coordination with each other. We could be moving a vehicle, we could be bringing in EMS, we could be starting to do repairs if it's safe to do so on damage like a traffic signal. So trying to find ways to do that quicker and more efficient, I think, is what this policy supports. So the hope is that could be effective.
That's great. And it might be a good case study, although Lord hope that we don't have more astonishing accidents like that. But that might be a good case study to look at, because we'd heard a lot of conflicting and different answers as to why it took so long to clear. And a number of them were things that you just cited. So it might be a good case study. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Is that Mayor Houston?
Yes, ma'am, it is. And I'm certainly I'm not opposed to this. I would want to hear from emergency personnel, what are realistic ones. But I just want to mention that the 2 San Marcos police officers who were injured and either have come back to work yet, but we hope that they will, was one who lost most of her leg, and there were a number of bones broken because she was pulling something out of a roadway. And another one of our officers who had some very severe injuries, he's not back on duty yet and won't be for quite a while, was the same thing, pulling something out of a roadway. Clearly, they were pulling things out, trying to prevent future accidents. But I just want us to be sure that we're not so, hurry. I mean, if they had waited for, somebody to come behind them, they had their flashers on, it would have been safer for them. So I don't know what the best answer is, but I just want to recognize that, the roadway, 2 of our officers are not back at work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Is that Councilmember Matea?
Yes, ma'am. Tom, great presentation. I just had 2 quick comments or questions I wanted to ask you. Looking at your moving forward with 6 initiatives, your number 2 regarding the regionalization of a heavy tow program, is there anything akin to that anywhere else? I heard you mention in passing Georgia, but I found that quite interesting to have a regional contract for the expedition of specific heavy vehicles regarding towing.
Yes, there are a number of examples of that. Typically what we try to do is have pre-qualified providers that have shown that they have the types of heavy wreckers, the essentially very large tow trucks, the cranes, and the training. And that's a key part, is having the training to be able to safely move, large scale type crashes that have heavy vehicles, be able to do that quickly. You mentioned, or as you said, we did mention Georgia. They have something called the TIME program that does provide some incentives for heavy crashes to clear those quickly. Generally, we feel like those may cost probably in the tens to hundreds of thousands per year to implement, but the amount of time that they can save by taking incidents that involve heavy vehicles that often can take hours to remove and reduce that into something much shorter, we think has been very well worth it for the agencies that have implemented something like that. So we are looking at a program to understand the cost, how that would work. Do we have right now with Texas, the types of providers that have that equipment and training to implement a policy like that. The hope is that we can have something like that available, particularly again during 35 construction.
Excellent. And my second comment was, I saw the number 5 regarding the standardization of the data. I'll be frank, I found that disconcerting to say the least that that's not the case now. Are we just seeing a hodgepodge regarding the actual collection of data at specific sites regarding accidents? And is there a baseline criterion that's fit with that? Or is it just a winner takes all, everything else grab bag regarding what we're seeing regarding that? Because you would think that at minimum, you would want some sort of discernible baseline to be able to articulate what's occurred at a specific wreck for future, you know, for, I mean, I hate to say it, lawsuits and other things with that as well, just for, you know, collection when it comes to transit. But what are you seeing now, and how, and what do you think something that you can implement can help necessitate to actually have a regionalization or at least some sort of uniformity when it comes to that?
Sure. There is statewide, including in Central Texas, some very good crash data. There's a system that TxDOT operates called the Crash Record Information System, or CRIS. It has excellent data in terms of the number of crashes, the severity of it, and the location of it. And it's a really good tool for identifying hotspots for crashes. However, it doesn't collect incident clearance time. So we know crashes, we know where they are, we know how severe they are, we know the cause of them, but we don't know how long it takes to clear them. The only reliable source of data we've seen right now is through TxDOT with their traffic management center. When you see the cameras out there and the hero trucks, when they respond or they cover an incident with their cameras or with their trucks, they do report how long, you know, when that incident occurred and how long before the road is cleared, as well as before the entire incident scene is cleared. The goal was ultimately, obviously, to get the roads cleared, but we really want to clear the entire incident so people aren't rubbernecking, so there's not the danger that someone on the side of the road could get hit. TxDOT has very good data where they have coverage, and that's really only the freeways, the interstates, and freeways in the more urban areas. We are trying to add to that CRIS data that's used around the state, fields that people would start to identify when the road was cleared and when the incident was cleared. DPS does that as a regular policy, but many of the cities that collect crash data don't currently do it. We're working to try to implement around the state. And I think if we have that, that would give us much better data in terms of knowing how long it's taking to clear incidents in Central Texas.
We can certainly lead the way in Central Texas with our NPO doing that. Are there any other questions from the policy board on this particular item? I will, he doesn't know it, but I'll volunteer one of our constables who was a former Round Rock PD person who did a lot of the incident investigations. And if you're looking for somebody from law enforcement, I'm sure other policy board members have people that they could volunteer, but I'll volunteer Constable Sharon to help with any of those kind of questions, and he can certainly help coordinate as well. And so unless there's any other questions, we will move on to item number 12, which is an update on our FY 2019 audit finding results.
Good afternoon. This is Teresa with Campo staff. Today we're presenting the fiscal year 2019 audit results. The audit was completed and submitted to the Federal Clearinghouse. We had a clean audit. The audit was performed by Montemayor, Britton, Bender, PC. And today we have Mr. Archie Montemayor, who will provide an overview of the results and can answer any questions that you might have. So thank you, and here's Mr. Montemayor.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My pleasure to talk to you. I'm going to be very brief, but open to any questions you might have, and hopefully I can answer them. Now, so we completed our audit. You received what we call a clean opinion. In our opinion, your financial statements are materially correct in accordance with the accounting principles. Because you received federal funding, we have two other reports that are in that financial statement document. Both of those two reports talk about two things. One is internal control, and two is compliance. Our findings, our results are similar. We are not aware of internal control weaknesses or deficiencies, so there's none reported there. And in our opinion, you complied with the requirements of your federal grant dollars, and we are not aware of any non-compliance with any other dollars. Those are as clean as those report gets. In addition to the financial statement audit, we issue a document called Communications with Those Charged with Governance, and that it's about 2 or 3 pages, fairly brief. It's all standard, regular information about the audit. There's nothing that I would point out or highlight at this point in time unless you have some questions.
Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Montemayor? Okay, well, thank you for the update and congratulations, Teresa and your team. I know it takes a lot of hard work to get to such a brief presentation. So,
yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Shea. I don't know if we can answer it with this audit finding, but I would be interested in seeing over time the growth in the budget. I don't know if the auditor is able to address that at this time, but I'd be interested to know how much our budget has increased year over year.
I think we can get that update from Ashby at, we'll get a budget update at our next meeting.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 13. Ashby, that is your opportunity to update us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had a few things I wanted to cover today. The first is the current status of the Federal Transportation Bill, also known as the FAST Act. So the FAST Act is set to expire at the end of this calendar year. And in my opinion, it is unlikely that Congress will approve a new federal reauthorization transportation bill this year. There's only been a House version that's been drafted so far. I am not aware of a Senate version. The House version did not get outside of the House committee. I don't think it went to the full House for vote yet. And with the election coming up, it's unlikely that we're going to see anything move forward at this point in time. What we are expecting and what we're hearing out of our national associations and officials in Washington is that a continuing resolution of the current bill is highly likely. And we're hearing that a continuing resolution of 1 year is probably what will get passed before the current bill expires at the end of the year. If you look back at FAST Act and the two prior bills, there were multiple continuing resolutions before a new reauthorization bill kicked in. So I would expect that we probably will see at least 2 continuing resolutions to extend the FAST Act before we see a new federal transportation bill kick into place. Also, we are hearing more and more about a potential for a federal transportation stimulus bill. Once again, based on my experience having worked in DC for almost 11 years, we're almost into the election season. For this year, I wouldn't expect to see a stimulus bill this year. My guess is the earliest we would see one would be February or March of next year, probably March. We are hearing lots of different numbers. I've heard some folks throw around a trillion, that's with a T. I've also heard billions, but not how many billions. So a lot of different agencies and organizations are working on a potential stimulus bill and providing information to Congress. Some of the things that we're working on through our national association and in conjunction with the American Public Transportation Association and the National Association of Regional Councils is asking Congress to consider providing those federal stimulus funds through the current surface transportation block grant formula process. So that's the method we currently receive our Category 7 money through. We're also asking that Congress temporarily suspend the requirement for a 20% match. So for you as local governments, if this money came through and they honored what we're asking for, you would not have to come up with the match, and we can get the projects out the door that much faster and hopefully get people back to work. We're also asking that this money could also be used on the match for money that has already been allocated on the federal side. So won't have any particulars on that one anytime soon, but please know that we are working on that. Then some of the things that I'm going to switch topics for a minute. We've had a few phone calls from some of the board members asking about what's coming up potentially for this fall for Campo. One of the things that I want to make sure the board knows is that we have not forgotten about the maintained deferred list, particularly the deferred projects on the list. The board did ask staff to come up with some process for prioritizing those deferred projects. We have not forgotten that. We are working on that. Our goal is to have something to the board to consider and hopefully approve no later than November of this year. We will also work with TAC on that as we move forward. We're hoping to draft something up in the next probably 45 days. Then we are also going to be asking the board probably next month whether or not you want to proceed with a separate call for projects for Federal Transit Administration 5310 money. This is the rural transit money that we normally do a call for. Then, as you heard Ryan mention earlier, we will have our regular long-range plan and TIP amendment calls this fall, unless we hear from the local governments that they don't have anything that needs to be processed right now. That would not be highly unusual, seeing that we just adopted the long-range plan in May and we just adopted the new TIP in June. So we're going to ask folks if they need something to be processed in the fall amendment cycle. If not, then we may forego that amendment cycle until the spring 2021 amendment cycle. Then we've also had some phone calls from board members asking about TxDOT's Unified Transportation Program. And we have taken a look at that. And I'm going to ask Chad to cover that. Before I turn it over to Chad, one of the things I do want to point out is that TxDOT is set to take action on the delta on the funding for I-35 at this month's meeting. So with that, I'll ask Chad to cover the UTP item.
Thanks, Ashby. Yeah, Campo staff had been requested to review the draft 2021 Unified Transportation Program, the UTP, TxDOT's 10-year plan, to ensure that the I-35 Capital Express project was fully funded. The updated 2020 UTP that was adopted in April of this year still had a $934 million funding gap. $633 million of that funding, of course, came from the reprioritization of projects that this board agreed to at its last meeting on June 8th. The remaining funding delta of $301 million has been included in the 2021 UTP as Category 12 strategic priority funds, again, indicating the high priority of this corridor and this project to the Transportation Commission and the state. Regarding the draft UTP, a virtual public meeting and hearing were held in July with a comment period that began on July 10th and which concludes today. The Transportation Commission is scheduled to consider adoption of the 2020 UTP at its August 27th meeting. That's all I have on that, Ashby.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Okay, hearing.
I have some questions. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, couldn't see you. Councilmember Kitchen.
Actually, you just spoke to this, but you talked in terms of fall planning activities, including the deferred project prioritization process. Is there any more detail that you want to suggest at this point, or is this a placeholder to let us know we'll be talking about it?
This is just a placeholder at this point, council member.
Okay.
And we're going to continue to visit both with TAC and with board members as we move forward.
Okay. There was another item that I wanted to ask you about is potential fall planning activities. And those are just follow-up activities on, and maybe they're just in the nature of briefings. But I think we need to understand and circle back around on where we are with regard to the analysis that TxDOT did on the Austin to San Antonio corridor.
Okay, the Capital Alamo study.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we will certainly do that.
I just wanted to mention that. I think it's important for us to just understand where that's at and the extent to which there's any next steps or not. So.
Yes, ma'am. We'll look at bringing that back next month.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Okay, then the announcements, there'll be a TAC meeting on August the 24th, and our next policy board meeting will be on Monday, September 14th at 2 o'clock. So with that, we will adjourn this meeting at 3:33. Thank you all and have a good afternoon.
Welcome. Take care, y'all.
Wear a mask and wash your hands.